Welcome to Inside Social Care, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the care industry. Join us as we explore the challenges, celebrate the triumphs, and shine a spotlight on the incredible people who make up the social care workforce. From personal stories to policy deep dives, we're here to give you an unfiltered look at the heart of our communities. This is Inside Social Care, and this is where we start the conversation. My guest today has had an illustrious career across many different parts of adult social care. And she's currently the Chief Executive Officer of Forest Healthcare. I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Charles.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Anytime. It's a pleasure to have you, definitely. So, Amanda, obviously we've known each other for a while, but you've been in social care for many, many years. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and you're kind of you've got a bit of a who's who of providers across the sector. Maybe you could just tell us your story.
Yeah, sure. So qualified as a nurse in 1986 and worked in the NHS. Was very lucky actually during my time in the NHS to join what we often saw doctors doing with their GP rotations, to join a rotation programme. So that gave me the opportunity to work in older people, medicine, intensive care, even did a bit of paediatrics. So I kind of spat out of the NHS with a really kind of cradle to grave experience and acute and chronic experience. So very
and
great.
where did you do that?
That was between Leicester General and Grantham Hospital.
What was your favourite specialty?
I think the love of paediatrics was took me to my first job. So I loved paediatrics.
Okay.
Go figure.
Yeah, there you go.
But I learnt the most probably in intensive care.
Fascinating.
Really tight team, working really closely with really complex patients, and the learning curve there was really steep. So learnt the most in intensive care. Loved paediatrics.
Right. Okay, Corey. Sorry, I interrupted. So after that baptism of fire.
So after that, I started to see some changes in the NHS that even though I was quite junior still, I didn't like. I saw funding changes, some of the senior roles in teams leaving, redundancies happening, which didn't seem to make any sense to me when there was always high demand for people. And I kind of just made up my mind that I wanted to have a go at nursing anywhere other than the NHS and see what it looked like. So I applied for all sorts of different things. I applied for the nurse role at Harrods randomly. Just
Right.
I think it was in the nursing press, and I thought, why not? But what happened, Charles, was there was a 120-bedded care home in the local town, and they were looking for a supernumerary deputy manager. And I was like, okay, that sounds completely different to anything that I have been doing, but why not? Put my application in, got invited for an interview. It was a Westminster healthcare home, all single story, beautifully fitted out, not fitting my perception of what most care homes look like. Walked in, met the team while I was waiting to meet the home manager and be interviewed. And my psyche changed from, well, let's see how this goes, to I want this job. I really want this job. I see something different here that I'll be a part of. And that really began my journey in social care. So I've had the opportunity to work from the ground up, which is a blessing and a curse. I've worked as a deputy home manager in a really big home, then a small market town in my first home manager's role. The company sold, and there was a bifurcation of senior team members. Somebody called me and said, I'm setting up a quality team, a regional quality team. Would you like to join? So moved into quality with Ashbourne Healthcare, and then became a quality director later on. And yes, just kind of moved into those senior leadership roles from there through Sunrise, and then further on to Forest Healthcare as Chief Executive Officer.
Great. Well,
here I am.
Well, we're going to hear a lot more about that. But how was the transition, I guess, because as in for most of your career, you're doing sort of clinical and then clinical governance roles. What was the transition like from there? And it was at Sunrise that you went into the MD role, sort of more holistic business? I don't know. What was that?
Yeah.
How did that feel?
Yeah. I mean,
Or is it?
I think it's, there are those pivotal roles that change when you're moving through your career that are a faster leap than others, and that is a fast leap. So you're suddenly a generalist, not working in an area of expertise. Um, and it was an interesting role in that there were kind of three elements to consider. Um, US company. So
Mhm.
way of doing things versus UK regulation and best practice and making those two things work. And then a team of SVPs in the US linking into your team in the UK, but also leading that team in the UK. So
Mhm.
be complicated role. Again, I learned so much. It was a very steep learning curve. Yeah, I would say that to anyone moving from specialist to generalist, brace for impact. You'll be learning a lot really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What any sort of horror stories that come to mind, or any particular instance where you think, God, I learned a lot there?
I think the perfect storm for me at that time was the new fundamental standards had been launched kind of around about the time that I'd moved into that role, possibly 6 months later. And while I'd done lots of discussion, education, and preparation, I don't think the sector as a whole was completely prepared for how much
Hmm.
the change in regulation would impact. There was a lot. There were a lot of burns at that time, and if you're fiercely proud of what you do and fiercely proud of what you're trying to achieve, then this new rating of inadequate was as equally scarring and damaging as the elation of an outstanding.
And so that only sorry, show my naivety. Well, that only came in relatively recently then.
No, this was, oh gosh, Sunrise was when, 2016?
Well, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
2016, right? But sorry, you're saying that and this might be a super naive question, but you're saying before that, CQC didn't put out inadequate ratings? No.
No, their ratings were described differently. So,
Right, right,
yeah. So, this was this new language that
right,
everybody was getting used to.
right, right.
And I think the debate rages today whether that language is appropriate. I mean, Ofsted have obviously taken a view. We're yet to
Yeah.
see where CQC will head with that. But that
Mm.
that was a tough time. And also the employment market was very challenging because a lot of the homes were built in very exclusive areas, beautiful, high value areas, kind of
My
cart of
my
like.
my grandfather was a customer actually.
Oh, well, there you go. You see, Esher, Virginia Water, etc. Not very many chimney pots of people that wanted to earn a living wage living in
Mm,
local vicinities. So recruitment was a real challenge. Um,
mm,
and so those two things, and as we know, hiring the right people to do the right job and having tenure with people so that they really become experts in their field of caring is the holy grail of getting great care, great
mm.
consistency of care. So, yeah, at those times, that was a tough time. I remember that being very tough. And when you're in a learning seat as
Mm.
well, you don't have a toolkit of answers.
Yeah, you don't
Really,
have that sort of pattern recognition to be like,
exactly to
this is
get
how I did this before.
I've seen this before. I've seen
Yeah.
this before. I know what we need to do. However, that experience equipped me really well further down the line. So, when we started to see post COVID, the workforce and the market change, I could see the signs. I've seen
Mm,
this before. We're going to run into difficulties. We need to act now. We need to look
mhm,
for the tsunami, not wait till it
mm.
does.
Yeah,
So, everything that's a challenge at the time, you can turn into a benefit later on, can't you? If you take it with you. Yeah,
absolutely. It's like time, you get strong by spending time in the gym, or whatever
that's
the
it.
expression is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so, and obviously you're at Forest Healthcare now,
yeah,
been through that whole, I mean, been through that whole kind of progression. And
yes,
I think one of the untrue narratives about social care is the sort of lack of progression opportunities within the sector,
Yes.
which obviously you're, you know, shining example of
Yeah,
the
testament to.
testament to the development, to I guess the development opportunities.
Yes.
What's the secret to how do you do it?
How do you do it? So I think that, it's a soundbite, isn't it? Always be a little bit scared. And if you're in a job where you're not learning, you're possibly in the wrong job.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, be a little bit scared and don't imagine that you need to know 100% of the job to apply for the job. Apply for it anyway if you've got willingness to learn and tenacity to feel the pain as you're learning, then you will put yourself in a position to be willing to put yourself forward. Probably less superficially and more relevant to people at the very beginning of their careers, I would say, you're interviewed for a role, but you can also interview the organization that you're planning to go and work for, and understanding, say and get an interview, I'd really like to progress in this field. What are my opportunities? I don't expect to walk in and be handed them on a plate. I know I've got to show my worth and my willingness to work hard, but down the line, what are they? And do a little bit of research in terms of, would that match where you hope to go?
Mm.
Because finding yourself somewhere where there is no ability to progress, either because there aren't the roles or because there isn't the learning opportunity, then you may be wasting your time. You may be
Fully,
wasting time. Yeah.
fully agree with that. That'll be a good soundbite, I think, for LinkedIn. Great. So obviously your current gig, uh, Forest Healthcare. Tell us a little bit about Forest Healthcare.
Okay, so we've got 13 homes ranging across London and the southeast. Typically atypical, I'd say. So rather than having cookie cutter homes, similar design, similar age, similar size, we range from purpose built. My largest home is 178 beds to my smallest
Wow.
home. Yes, a beautiful listed property in Buckinghamshire with 24 beds. 27 beds, I correct myself. So, yes, a varied portfolio. So in terms of establishing ourselves as Forest, it's about establishing who we are rather than what we are. So what we can consistently say about Forest Healthcare is that we take our living values that we offer to our residents incredibly seriously. Our core values are living values, and we live and breathe those every day. We celebrate when we've seen them, seen that they've been delivered, and we
Mm.
know they've been delivered through the reviews that we see, the inspection reports that we get, and the feedback that we receive from other stakeholders. So that's our consistent goal, is to live to those values.
I'll put you on the spot. What are the values?
To always give choice, go above and beyond, always show respect, look after people with empathy, and always offer support.
Great.
Memorial care, there you go.
Excuse me. Okay, cool. It stands for CARES.
There you
Oh,
go.
very good, very good, very
Yeah,
clever.
yeah.
And so and I guess so that applies obviously to your residents. Is that what you would call your
Absolutely.
customers, or but
Yes.
also your internal staff as well?
Well, you're right, because I made sure when we looked at our vision and our mission was holding these values to our residents, their families, and each other.
Mm.
Because, why would you have an organisation where you're saying these things are really, really important for our residents and their loved ones? Hey, you guys, do what you want. So,
Mm.
we want to make sure that's an ethos of all caring about each other.
And then I mean, I guess it's easy to sit down in a sort of office and make up some nice
Yeah.
values.
Yeah.
Actually, then implementing them, putting them into practice, and you talked about how you celebrate them across the organization and kind of reward people based on
Yeah.
that, or make sure that that you're emphasizing those kind of positive behaviors.
Yes.
How do you practically go and do that? Because I imagine it's quite hard running I find it hard enough at Florence at our company, but especially when you've got quite a distributed organization.
Yes.
Um, how do you make sure that you're constantly reinforcing that message and emphasizing who you are?
So I try to create a loop of feedback that results in that celebration rather than just
Right.
pick and choose. We have little pins. Each one says one of those words. So we have different colour pins for choice, above and beyond, respect, empathy, and support. And we have a nomination process. Peer, colleague, team member, manager, leader, senior team, anyone can nominate a team member where they've witnessed that core value and breathing in the home, and then that recognition is placed to the team member. We also look at our carehome.co.uk feedback, and we celebrate using pins as a thank you. Say thank you for people when we can see that the review that we've received upholds words that speak to those living values. And then our annual conference is Living Values Awards Conference. So
Right.
that's when we take the big stories of the year that celebrate the behaviours that speak to those core values. So by perpetuating that, trying to create that perpetual cycle, what I do understand is that our team members, when I visit the homes and I talk to them, they can talk to what our core values are and what kind of actions would sit behind them. What I don't see is people saying it's on the website or there's up there. Let me just go and remind myself. People are excited by what the core values stand for and how they can demonstrate them.
Right. What's your favourite value?
Above and beyond. It's the pin we have to order the most of.
Okay, above and beyond. Okay, that's good.
Above and beyond, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
My favourite value that our value is embrace the adventure, because it's really useful, because when if you want people to do things that they don't necessarily want to do, you can just go embrace the adventure, and then
I like it. Yeah.
yeah, it's very useful. It's very
That
useful one.
parachute jump, embrace the adventure.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow.
So tell us a little bit more about your team, because I know that you've been investing recently in some. Well, let's talk about two things. Firstly, let's talk about, you mentioned earlier about making sure that you're hiring people with the right values for the organization, and ensuring you're getting right people in through the front door. How do you go about doing that?
So I coming back to the core values, but they can be used when you're interviewing. You tend to look at a person's CV, look at the frequency that people have changed roles, what their skill qualifications are. Actually, value-led interviewing is really important. Understanding, what their heart is like, as opposed to they know, because you can train people lots of things, but you can't necessarily teach kindness or teach empathy. It has to come from in here. So I think value-led interviewing, and then the engagement piece and retention piece are hand in hand. What I say to our managers is, you can't do engagement, you can't put it in your calendar like Friday 2 to 4 engagement. That has to be something that people feel as well. So, recently we've introduced a new platform to our whole team, and that's related to making sure that they feel valued by giving them something that we think is important to them. There's lots of great things that are done for teams, blue light card and some discounts, but we really wanted to look at people's health and well-being. So looking at, online GP service, 24/7 accessibility to that, counselling, family advice, financial advice, all of these support mechanisms we just felt would be really important. So we've launched that recently, and I have to say it was really excitedly received by
Great.
in the homes. So yeah. And of
And
course,
have you?
just going back to that point of interview the employer as well as being interviewed by the employer, make sure that we show that to people and that we promote that before people even come through the door to us, that, these are our principles of valuing.
And I guess, a very good way of showing people that you value them, but ultimately, potentially even selfishly as an employer as well, like the benefits, the knock-on benefits to you of giving people easy access to a GP, so that they are fit
Absolutely.
and well and healthy and not having to miss work all the time, or or
exactly.
whatever it is
Yeah.
huge.
Yes, and the impact, on the individual, but on the team that are on duty on that day, or,
Mm,
trying to survive beyond lots of people that can't get access to a GP and can't come to work, or, they feel stressed or anxious, and that's impacting them. Those have real knock-on effects. So I'd like to think everybody benefits, but there's
yeah,
a bit for everybody there.
and uh, everyone talks about lots of the funding pressures affecting the sector, particularly around the cost in inverted commas of the workforce, and things like national insurance rises
Yeah.
and minimum wage increases and things like that. I guess maybe some providers would look at a benefit like that and find it difficult to find the money for that kind of thing. How have you done that?
Looked forward. We've looked
Yeah,
forward. I mean, the maths speak for themselves when you think about the working days that are lost,
yeah,
because of ill health. I do appreciate that, the tighter and harder the margins are squeezed, the tighter the gap, or the wider the gap is created between funding and expenditure, the harder it is to find that
mm,
investment. But I really do see it as a future investment, or investing for the future. So if you can, I would say
It-
it's imperative.
have you seen it start actually coming through in the numbers in terms of sickness
It's
rates or time off or whatever?
We've just launched. So
Just launched.
we've
Okay.
just launched. You go and I think you gave me a like on LinkedIn, actually, Charles. So you might see it over there. But lots of celebration. But we've just launched, and one of the things I worry about and have talked to the team about is you can launch these things and then they just drop through the cracks.
Yeah.
Posters curl up, new people start, and it's forgotten about in terms of something that is talked about. So our ambition is to make sure that this program is always talked about, always available to the team. New starters are brought onto the program, so that it's something a bit like our core values. At first, they were just launched, and everybody had to get to understand them and know what they meant and how to deliver them. But if you just persevere, consistently talking about it, promoting it, and celebrating the outcomes, then
Mm,
it becomes embedded in the organization, and it just becomes eventually what we do. It's what we have,
mm.
it's what we do. So, yeah, we've just launched, but my goal is that we annoy everybody by always talking about it, and never let it just drop between the cracks.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. And I guess you talked about some of the workforce pressures in the sector in 2016 and then post COVID. I mean, how are you finding your recruitment and retention landscape at the moment?
So,
'Cause there's a lot going on. There's been a lot of change.
there's a lot going on. So I think, there was a stampede towards overseas recruitment,
Hmm.
post COVID, lots of burnout. We saw the turnover increase. We saw vacancies increase as people were experiencing those feelings, and we saw people leave. You know, Accounts of people saying, "I just want to do anything that doesn't scare me," in the way that that episode of COVID was so scary. We have actually seen people come back, which is fantastic. So, I worked in a job that wasn't scary. My God, it was boring. and,
Mm, yeah.
and that's what I was doing.
Mm,
So we've seen lots of people come back. I think for us, what we're looking at now is the squeeze from an overseas recruitment perspective,
mhm,
being able at the moment to hold our own in terms of attract people locally. And we want that blended attraction. We want to, recruit the best people, regardless of where they come from. But we also want to serve our local people and our local community, and welcome them as well. So I think what we're seeing emerging is making sure that people's right to remain is really well managed, certificates of sponsorship are really well managed, so that those people that we did recruit from overseas are supported to
mhm,
or to be in good time. should they choose to stay and make those applications. So that's the one thing.
And how
Um,
are you finding that? Because I hear quite a lot of horror stories from some other providers.
yeah. So how do we find it? We've found that we've had to work hard to put systems into place
Hmm.
to make sure that we are in good time, that we aren't, learning 2 weeks beforehand, but, gosh, this needs to happen and we're nearly timing out. So we've had to work on systems, processes, and really good communication to manage that and make sure that we're well in time so that we can
Hmm.
move through it. Um, yeah, so as it stands at the moment, we aren't seeing turnover increase. We are understandably not in the same position of that vast overseas recruitment campaign. I think our goal is to retain everybody we have,
Hmm.
um, and be first choice for people in the local area that want to work in social care. What does scare me as we see lots of kind of political landscapes about getting people back to work and whatever is the odd soundbite that's thrown around of, well, there's jobs in social care. Those people
Hmm.
can work there. I don't know any other industry that would accept being told,
So,
we'll just force people that can't work to come and work with you. I don't know,
mm,
another sector would say, "Well, that sounds good."
yeah.
So, right, so I think, that's kind of segues onto where social care is perceived, um,
And
by certain, political figures and how we need to continue working to change that perception.
I think
That's a
there's a bit of a
there's a lot in that
well,
answer.
there is a lot, and yeah, I think there's I was speaking to uh, Robert Kilgar, who's obviously built a
Yeah,
few, runs Renaissance Care in Scotland at the moment, but just launched a social care foundation on to try and drive uh, meaningful political change and reform across the sector.
yeah,
And he's quite politically involved, and he is a very nice guy, but he's quite cynical about some of the, I guess, political intentions of and how that feeds down into valuing the sector. And I guess the the I think the perception from a political standpoint is that all maybe politicians might look at some of the larger, well capitalized, mainly privately funded social care organizations and go, "It's all right, gov," and not realize that there's a vast swathe of the rest of vast
yeah,
swathe of providers who don't
yeah,
have it quite so easy, I guess, and
yes.
so therefore might define policy in a way that um, uh, is not particularly helpful. I've
I
said a lot there without saying anything. I actually didn't really say anything in that, what I just said then. But
Well, I think I can kind of read between the lines there. I think, um, I keep using the phrase sandbags, but there are many of them around at the moment. So we're hearing is it still rhetoric of a national care service?
mhm.
What does that mean? How could that be possible? Isn't that a return back to local authority funded, or not funded, but local authority run homes?
Well, I
Uh,
think it means a lot. It means a lot of different things. It could mean local authority run homes that I don't think work particularly well in the end, or it could mean, which I think is quite a good idea, is private. Continue to be private. Third sector, privately provided, not for profit. However, the existing operation of care services are, but rather than relying on local authority funding, having a much more joined up and centralized approach to funding that comes out of the same budget as the NHS, because then people will care about how well the system integrates.
Now that's good.
I think that's the idea.
That's
Because
good.
I was talking to another lady who works in a discharge team at insert NHS trust, hospital, whatever. And you'll know loads more about this than I do. But she has a team of 8 people, and it's all about taking people from their acute stay in hospital into the community. And I said, how much of your time is spent actually, helping the patients directly or residents directly, and how much is spent on a political kind of
Yeah.
funding battles between the ICB, the trust, and the local authority. And she said about 90% of it is spent on trying to get someone to agree to pay for the care. And that's so inefficient.
It's not only inefficient, if you look behind that 90% of time trying to get the funding, think about the person sitting in the hospital bed,
100%.
think about the person developing two unstageable pressure sores because they have been
Yeah.
immobilized during their stay in that hospital bed, that have developed incontinence because they have become immobilized in that hospital bed,
And they
lost
develop a,
hospital bed.
and they develop
Honestly,
a pneumonia and a UTI, and they decompensate, and 100%. Yeah.
depressed, lose the will to live. But hey, yeah, I mean, and the weeks and weeks and weeks of funding while they sit in that very expensive hospital bed. But the two sets of accounts I don't believe ever really compared. Like, imagine if the funding was somewhere else and that person was declared medically optimized and the funding was available, and the next step, whether that was domiciliary care or care home
Mm,
arrangement in place, and moved on, how much funding would actually have been saved, and
mm.
how much accessible acute care would have been made available to the current population that needed
Uh,
it.
100%. There's actually literally today in the Health Service Journal, you can't see it because it was a study that came out that said cost of late discharges, purely from NHS perspective, saying, number of days in bed for medically fit for discharge patients times £562 cost per day, whatever, it's £2 billion per year, right? So that's a relatively small number in an NHS budget perspective, but it's about 10% of social care budget.
Yeah,
So it's a huge amount of money. And that doesn't include, that is literally just number of days in bed times money. It
right.
doesn't include any of the stuff around the ancillary negative effects of being in hospital for too long,
Exactly.
or the capacity issues further up the chain in hospitals, or
Yeah.
the people who are working on these discharges. So yeah, I think it's scandalous how inefficient that.
Staggering, and it's inexplicable to a layperson when they're kind of
Mm,
saying, "Why can't this move along?"
mm,
Think about the family member that's arriving on the ward to say, "Where are we up to?" "Well, your dad's medically optimized now." "Right, what does that mean?" Basically means nothing. It
yeah.
basically, if you were to translate it properly, means we're done,
Mm,
but
yeah.
he needs to sit here.
I mean, it was years ago, but I remember when I was doing my medical rotations in Eastbourne Hospital, I think it was,
Right?
we had, you would probably regularly have, this was maybe 8-10 years ago, but you'd regularly have, a third probably of your 50 patients, whatever would be
Yeah.
MFFD, benefit discharge. You go around on the ward round and write that in the notes and move
Yeah.
on. Quite sad, really.
I know. I know. Gosh,
And then the poor nursing staff would have to pick it all up.
yeah, and deal with all the angry relatives, and
Exactly.
your
Yeah.
worker drifts off and says they're going to get back to you, and chasing
Yeah.
that down. Yeah, I know. Oh, how much could change? But I
Anyway.
think these are great big beasts that we're talking
Mm,
about, aren't they? And I think the kind of recipe to survival and not going nuts is accepting what you can't change
mm,
immediately, and working furiously away on what you can change or what you can do better. And what I do know, and I'm very proud of, certainly with the managers at Forest Healthcare, is when the call finally comes, somebody is ready for assessment and they
yeah.
need your care. My managers are typically there within 24 hours.
Hmm.
And I feel really proud about that after all this delay and all this
Mm,
hurry up and wait, wait there. You don't need to be here, be here, to
yeah.
give the family and the potential future resident hope, is that the next step now is an assessment, and the team are there. They
Mm,
take, they show up, and they get on with the job. That's fantastic. So
great.
there is a good news story right at the end
There are
when
lots of there are
it's lost.
Yeah, yeah, no, there are lots of good news stories, and actually, your point around, yeah, you can spend a lot of time banging the drum about funding or NHS or
Yeah,
international recruitment or whatever,
yeah,
but actually, you are in control of the domain,
that's it.
and you can build. And actually, I would much rather, if I would much rather be in, let's say, your position than running. Some people think that the NHS might get an easier ride, but you can control who's in your team.
Yeah,
You can control your assets and your buildings and the product that you
absolutely.
provide. You can control how you train people and develop people and your cost base and your revenue. So you've got a lot of levers to pull to create a great service.
You do have a lot of levers to pull, and you don't have to work to narrative that doesn't make any sense, particularly working with the board and working closely with funding partners. What I find really joyful, and, this takes me right back to that, those early days of being a deputy home manager, is the ability to make a decision. Uh,
Mm,
and that decision not be, trial of 1,000 courts and lost in the
mm,
ether at 18 months' time. That's really powerful. And
yeah.
I would say, Charles, when I was just before I started thinking about leaving the NHS, I'd done a piece of research. It was it was the nursing school. So this wasn't any grand research, but back then we were still taking temperatures with mercury thermometers.
Mhm.
Glass of mercury in someone's mouth. What could possibly go wrong? But I'd read about tympanic thermometry, and it sounded fantastic.
Mm.
So I asked the ward sister, could we do a trial? Could I run that trial? I've done the research, the theory of the benefits. Could we put that into practice? She was really supportive. We got two first generation electric thermometers, and we got busy with that. Then it works, it's accurate, it's less invasive, it's not glass, it's not mercury. Can we do this? No, sorry, no,
Mm.
I can't get it signed off. So when I moved into this role as a deputy home manager, I explained to the home manager, I've done this research, I'd really like to put it into practice. What do I need to do? And she said, buy to.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Go
And
to Boots.
that was the
Yeah,
light bulb moment. Like, this is
yeah.
difference. This is so powerful.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
That's very good.
yeah,
I think you also just said that you found working with your funding partners delightful. That's interesting.
yeah.
I don't think I share the same sentiment, but there you go. Uh,
Or I
with
do.
my funding partners. But because you've recently brought on some new funding partners at Forest. I think it's allowed you
Yeah,
to invest quite a lot in the environment. Tell us a
yeah,
little bit about that.
yeah. So
You've got a book as well, Swedish book.
yeah, a little book, a little Swedish book. Yeah, so gosh, it must be coming up for 18 months now.
Right.
Our investment partners made it very clear, funding partners made it very clear that they wanted to invest in the environment. So I felt a real responsibility, particularly because we are so different in size and shape and age of our homes. How do we do this really meaningfully? And how do we make it front facing and of higher value than just new wallpaper, chairs and curtains?
Mhm.
So, and it's a lot. We're going to spend a lot of money, and I want to get it right. Right, I don't want to get it
Mm.
wrong and have spent that
Yeah.
money. So, at the same time, my husband and I took a trip, and we cruised actually around Scandinavia, and I came across in this little bookshop the little book of Hugo. That book gives you permission to pronounce it any way you want, so everybody says
Okay.
it differently.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated with the philosophy of the environment creating feelings, and that kind of warm hug that the right environment can give you, and the concept that Hugo is just about those things, auditory, sensory feelings that create well-being. And
Mm.
at the same time, then came back and kind of thought, I've got a vision here of creating environments that make people feel great. So we
Mm.
worked with a great designer who understood the concept, understood what we were trying to create, and then at the same time spoke to my home managers, bought them all the book, and talked about it and explained how I want to really build this environment change into a philosophy of thinking. Now we're along the journey, so we're moving from home to home, and we're upgrading our homes and building this hygge experience into
Mm,
design that we're putting in. One of the very happy consequences of that is we've noticed that because the teams within those homes are seeing it more than just an upgrade or a redecoration, but whole new philosophy of thinking, we see people taking real pride in the environment,
mm,
enjoying the environment, and talking about the environment
mm,
and the other things that they can do to enhance that environment for
mhm.
them. So, flameless candles, hot chocolate, uh,
Yeah.
during the lighting, creating
Mm,
ambience. We're seeing the team really embrace that and see
mm.
it as something that's good for everybody. Um,
And obviously creates a nice environment for your residents, which is and in the home
Definitely.
that they live in, but also for your own team and staff, right? Like if you're, it has, for
Exactly.
me personally, the quality of my working environment has a huge impact on my day-to-day enjoyment at work.
Me too. Me too. And why assume that it's any different for the team of people who are solely charged with looking after the physical, emotional, and
Yeah.
psychological well-being of residents, that they might not need some physical, social, and environmental hugs themselves. So, yeah,
Great.
it's been a happy consequence of heading down that journey of redesign that it's really been embraced by everyone. And in practical terms, the most heart wrenching thing when you upgrade an environment is 2 months later seeing, chunks out of this and bits missing and nobody
Mm,
bothered to put that out. And so far, we just haven't seen that because
mm,
everybody's invested in it. So
great.
I know, long way back.
Awesome. You're
Yeah,
the first, probably the first figure care group in the UK, I imagine.
so.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
must talk to the foundation over
The Swedes.
yeah, and ask them for A, a visit, and B, not to sue me for copyright.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm sure they'd be very pleased.
I hope so.
Anyway, Amanda Scott, I think we'll draw it to an end there. That's been a really fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for giving us the time. Pleasure having you on the pod, and all the best with Forest Healthcare.
Thank you for inviting me, Charles. Lovely to talk to you as always.
All right. See you soon.
Take care.